Anybody else have anything? Okay, I'm starting to get frantic messages from the back of the room saying the audience has got so many questions to ask, it's like a fifth grade class that all has to go to the bathroom at once. So, without further ado, those of you who have questions, put your hands up and I'll just start pointing and you can throw them up here. We have a couple of microphones here that you can come up to and use. I don't know if there's a portable mic or not, but okay, so please come up and use one of these mics so that people can hear you.
Where are all the frantic questions?
Well, Joan. Joan, yes, please. Come on up and use the microphone.
This is not a question, but to add to what you were saying and everything and how to approach someone to give more.
Right.
When we had our capital campaign, they selected people, they asked people who would like to go over and talk to people, individually. So they got their assignments, they went out among the people, and then I love the way that Sylvia was the one who came to me, and she was so kind and so open. We really talked before we even got to the money. And even though I knew she was there for the money. But she said to me one thing that got me. She said, "What would you like to buy in the church?"
Right.
And I had never thought about that. I give, but I give what I can. But I never think about it going to any certain thing. It's out there.
Right.
So we decided that I paid for 2 chairs and some paint. And that was fine with me, because in my mind, I really did something. Because I'm on disability, it's not that much.
Right.
But in my mind, that was a whole lot to be giving. And it really built up my self-confidence and esteem to be giving.
Something you said reminds me of something that I have noticed a couple of times. We have sort of drifted away from the model of face-to-face canvassing, but I have always felt like face-to-face canvassing is much more than just about money. It's kind of a way of, if you will, of sort of maybe doing a census of the congregation, but really more to the point, it's just a way of reaching out and touching people. I never particularly liked being a canvasser or liked the concept of it, but whenever I could actually finally pin somebody down and get them to meet with me, I always enjoyed the conversations and sort of finding out what they felt about the church and how they got there and all that kind of stuff before we then made the bite. So I think that that's something to think about. So there's a lot to stewardship that has to do with just being in community together.
So I have a question, which is sort of about an unusual situation, and I'm curious to know about asking people who are not members of the congregation for money. Not so long ago, the longtime partner of somebody in my congregation died, and he apparently came from a very wealthy family. I'm supposed to do the memorial service, and someone suggested that because even though he wasn't a member of the congregation, it meant a lot to him, I approached the sort of wealthy members of his family for a donation to the congregation, which never would have occurred to me otherwise, and I feel some significant discomfort around that, so I'm kind of interested on thoughts and reflections.
Let's start with these folks. I have a couple of thoughts too, but let's go down here.
I think it's a very good approach, and if it's done tastefully, it can be very appropriate. And hopefully the family would have even viewed it as being a flattering potential to be a tribute to him. And if you view it in those terms, I think it's great.
I think it matters to look for where there might be a connection. You were performing the memorial service. There was a connection that was there, even though the family itself wasn't connected. And I know we talk a lot in my industry about inclination and capacity, and you may have the capacity and no inclination. So where is the inclination? What is the connection? How does it relate?
I just wanted to chime in with one. I'm sorry, man.
Go ahead.
I'm sure Allison knows this as well. Some of the largest university gifts, at least at Pittsburgh institutions, have been from people who haven't even been alumni of those institutions. One notable one to Duquesne years ago, before I even started working there, was from a person who was not a graduate of Duquesne. I'm not even sure it was a college graduate period, I don't remember, and he wasn't even Catholic. But he just liked Duquesne and the reputation and the excellence that he felt they put forth in education, and he left a fortune, which at the time, and may still be, the largest single gift they've ever received.
The ask is always uncomfortable, especially if it's not something, you get better at it, or it becomes less uncomfortable maybe. I don't know if you actually get better at it. It becomes less uncomfortable. But it kind of goes back to, I'm sorry, Cynthia. You know, she gave, and never minimize what you give. What I think was important was that the church gave you something concrete. You know, those 2 chairs are there and painted because of what you gave.
They're not there yet.
You better talk to Sylvia then.
Has your
the company went
Has your check cleared yet?
And as you can see, she's taken ownership over that. We'll make sure those chairs get there and are painted correctly, which is important. So finding out, again, what that, was the person who died. Were they very closely connected with the youth program, with, something within the church, in some way to memorialize them and let that family know, to give them a handle, so it's not just the money's going to the church, but to, there's going to be a plaque, and in some way that person and their life is going to be remembered.
And just adding another personal touch to it, I think you should do the ask.
Oh, yeah, no, I was...
And that you start by sharing your story of your connection with this person, and then use the legacy language to say, what do you think this person would want to leave to the world, that kind of thing. And then once you ask them maybe for something you have in your mind, we can talk about that, but then shut up and let them say no. Don't say no for them. I think that's the most important thing the book says about asking is, if someone had gone to Cynthia and say, I know you can't give because, you've got the cane and everything, that would have been offensive to her, It would have been offensive. I'm assuming you're disabled. No. Cynthia's at all the meetings, she's a highly committed person to the church. She will give to her greatest capacity if that connection is made. And so don't say no for them, no matter what you think they're able to do.
Okay.
Again, it's all about perceptions, too.
Yeah.
Many of the wealthiest, most prosperous donors do not wear Hugo Boss suits and Gucci shoes. Don't let that kind of surface thing dissuade you just in general from thinking who might have capacity or not capacity.
In fact, I got to add quickly, one of the most generous people in our congregation who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago and left us a humongous amount of money, more than we've ever seen, was notorious for coming to church looking like someone had just dragged him in from a dumpster. I mean, that's not literally true, but he would wear plaid pants, plaid shirts, wild ties, and the other thing I remember is because he and I sat in the same row of pews, he never ever stayed awake during any sermon that I ever saw for more than about 10 minutes. And also, he was everywhere. He was everywhere in our church and in our town, and that was the real clue as to where his heart lay. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to ask one question and get one free, if I may. The first one is, we're a small congregation, and we have a lot of people who don't pledge but give money every Sunday. How can we encourage this segment of our congregation to give more, or maybe even go over to a pledge?
Okay. That's a very good question. and I'm going to quickly hand it off to somebody else.
I guess if you can motivate people more about the benefits of membership. It's great to be a friend, but isn't it really awesome to feel like you're a full-fledged member of the congregation? Usually there's also some tie at least to voting privileges at the annual meeting, that kind of thing. Maybe you can give members coffee mugs, whatever it may be, to make them feel like they're even more a part of the congregation and they should want to take that extra step to achieve that higher level of involvement.
We talk about the importance of knowing what the budget is in advance so that we can continue the mission that the church has set forward, and if we don't know what they're going to give because they're just throwing in the plate each week, that we may not be able to do all the wonderful things we're doing.
Yeah, I think in part you would have to know, and it'd be difficult for someone's got to track how much people are giving, envelopes with names or whatever it may be. So you can then look at it and then say, okay, you've been giving this much a year, can you pledge this to help us out with knowing the budget, and are you willing to move that up? So maybe, taking that first step of looking and starting to track those dollars, starting with an Excel sheet, I would suggest, not the several $100,000 system.
Right.
Well, I would just say, this is an opportunity for a one-on-one canvas and to find out what they're thinking, why they do it that way.
Yeah,
Because maybe they're giving, like they would give to this and not to that, they're inspired in the moment, and not, you don't know what they're thinking.
Yeah, I can tell you something that we don't do this, but I know that some churches don't like to use the terminology pledge, and they will say your intended gift. And I think for some folks that the notion of pledging, I know that I've heard people say, look, I don't feel right, making a commitment that I may not be able to keep. And they think of pledge as having that connotation. Now, if that's what you're running into, I think you can say, look, that's okay. What is your intention? What's your goal? We won't call it a pledge. We'll just tell us what you'd like to give in the course of the year, and call it an intended gift. I'm not sure that that's what's going on, because I think different people have different reasons for not wanting to, quote, pledge. I mean, I know some people in our church don't pledge because they said that's what they used to do in the church that I'm running away from. I'm not going to do that. But for some folks, it's that sense of I can't make an ironclad guarantee. They don't understand, I don't think, that for most of us, a pledge who do this, a pledge is not an ironclad guarantee. It's just a statement of intention, and that's enough for us to write a budget. But without at least a statement of intention, we are often really floundering around trying to figure out, well, what is our likely income going to be for the year? So I suggest that you might want to, as I said, I think it's right, you might want to make the pitch that Al suggested, is to say, look, we're not trying to hold your feet to the fire. We just really, without having these kind of gifts that people state what they intend to do, it's very hard for us to write a budget that we think we can, meet.